Mahalo crew. I'll sit down. Hawaiian.
What you call housekeeping. So first of all, the LHES, this first building here, the bathrooms are open. It's all the way at the end. Or if you guys want to go to the next building over, the bathrooms are right in the beginning. We should have a sign-in sheet that's going around. Please sign in, let us know your information. We also have two posters over here that says parking lot. So if you guys have any questions or mana'o that you guys want us to look at before the end of our meeting, there should be a marker over there. Go ahead and write your mana'o down. There's also a basket right there by Chelsea. Chelsea, raise your hand. There's also a basket right over there. If you guys want to drop in a mana'o there, you guys can go ahead and do that and we'll look at it. Oh yeah, no.
May kakou. O kau isang ano mo Kaiapuni Honolulu. Nui ko mahalo ikiani ako ko ikiani ko maki ho Kumu Papahana o Lanai me kokoi ko ola ni ka ola Hawaii apuni ko mo ai Hawaiian o Hawaii. Loko no o na kayo o Hawaii dike ole o ke ia Hawaiian. So I thank everybody for welcoming us here today. I think it's very exciting and I'm very honored to be part of this movement to bring Kula Hawaii to Lanai and to put it back into the communities across the state, the Hawaiian communities across the state. I represent the Department of Education at the state level Immersion office, Hawaiian Language Immersion office. My supervisor is Keoni, who is here, who oversees the Hawaiian education programs statewide for all Hawaiian education programs in the department. My specific kuleana is to work with Kaiapuni schools, Immersion schools, and so that's why I'm here today. Hopefully we can get us to a point where your needs are heard and that you guys can make a decision on, a collective decision on what you guys would like to see for your community and use us as resources to help support what you need in order to get to make that happen within Hawaii's public education system. So to me that's exciting. I want to kind of set the stage just a little bit in terms of the agenda. What we'd like to do is kind of get some real brief discussion going on about what your expected outcomes are for today's meeting. And then I'd like to show you guys some of the things that are currently happening within the Department of Education around Hawaiian language education, specifically in immersion schools, and then some of the new things, new and exciting things that we're hoping to see happen in the near future in terms of shifting directions, and then sort of use that as a platform for you to kind of start thinking about what Lanai's needs are, and we'll invite the panel to come up and open up the meeting for some questions and answers, if that's okay. So, the first question I'd like to ask each of you to sort of consider, and then what I'll do is I'm going to ask our volunteers to share their manao. Something that's always been really important to me in this position is to make sure that we understand what the community expects. And then we can sort of set the stage for whether or not the expectations of the community can be met through the services that we provide through Hawaii's Department of Education. In a collective effort with our different stakeholders. So I'd like to ask each of you to maybe at your tables, have a real brief discussion, maybe 5 minutes, and talk about what your expected outcomes for today's meeting is. When you decided to come and join the meeting today, what did you think was going to happen at the end of the meeting, and what were you going to walk away with? And so I want you to have a brief discussion in about 5 minutes, and I'm going to ask people to volunteer to share what your expectations are. I'm going to write it on the chart paper here. And then we'll kind of keep that as a gauge to see whether or not we're getting to that point where we can meet your expectations at the end of the day. Okay? So real brief, 5 minutes. What are your expectations, outcomes from today's meeting? Okay, cameraman, give me a good idea. I'm going to ask one person from each table at a time to come up and share one of the ideas that was discussed on the table. And then we'll have Kauna'oa recording your ideas on the chart paper. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and start with this table right here. This table right here. So we're sharing what the expected outcomes for today's meetings are. What did you expect when you came to the meeting today?
Aloha, good morning, good morning. So our table, we actually had a whole paper filled of stuff, but one that I think what is my expectations is, I know that there are different models of Kula Kaiapuni across the state, and I hope to walk away from this meeting with what kind of recommendations do you guys have for Lanai's model? For example, like what grade do we start with, and like what are some of the best practices, and essentially where do we start, because we're basically from the bottom up. Okay, that's my one.
Thank you. So what recommendations could the panel have for starting up a school here on Lanai in terms of the models of Kaiapuni education that exists currently within the department, and perhaps some information about where you should start in terms of grade level? Thank you. Okay, next people.
What we are expecting for today's meeting is where we stand as a community to push this movement forward. To continue the Hawaiian cultural values for our community.
Perfect. So where does the community stand, in terms of the Lanai community, on this issue of having immersion education and extending Hawaiian culture and language on this island in your schools? Mahalo. Next. People? You can pass it over. You can come back to you.
Aloha everyone. We basically came up with the same idea that Chelsea did. But I would like to know basically what we can do in our community to support Kula Kaiapuni, because every community is different, and I know how unique this community is. So whatever it takes to support the need that we have here on Lanai, no matter how big or how small, we just want to know.
I think what you'll find is community plays a big role, so it's a very good question to bring up in terms of roles and responsibilities. The next table.
Hello, my name is AJ, and what we talk about for our expectations is the parents' role of what do you expect of us to do to help our children go through this Kula Kaiapuni. I think that's it.
And again, I think what you'll find is parents play a big role in making Kaiapuni successful. So very good. Next table.
All we're really doing is we're gathering information.
Okay, so just gathering information on the last table. The back table. Somebody want to come up and share?
I guess our table was more concerned about if the community is aware that this school is for everyone and not only Hawaiians.
That's great. That's a good point to bring up. Whether or not this school is going to be for everybody or just for Hawaiians. I think I can probably answer that already in front by saying this is a public education school, therefore it's open to everybody, K-12. Next table.
Aloha, I'm Sandy, and our table discussed that by the end of this meeting, we'd like to know what must be done so we can start and have the same philosophy when we leave here.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear.
Or have the same philosophy.
So, this table. So this table was sharing whether or not everybody's going to walk away on the same page, right, in terms of philosophy of immersion education and what's going to happen in the school. Mahalo. Next table.
Aloha. The question sort of asked, or one learned, was about the integration of common core standards or the international or national standards into the curriculum so that the students have the ability to step forward as they graduate from school, I guess. Yeah? Thanks.
So I think that question is related to the content that will take place in terms of the classes and the instruction around Common Core and how that would be addressed. Okay, these are all very good questions, and hopefully we can meet your expectations in terms of providing you with the information that you'll need to make a decision. Those of us that are on the panel that have come today are really just sitting here as support to the needs of Lanai. But I think the decision on whether or not you guys should be moving forward to have a Kaiapuni school on Lanai should be collective amongst your school administrator, those that will be on teaching staff, the parents that are here, and the community people that are here. And whether or not you guys decide that this is something that you'd like to see happen here, we're just sort of the people that are here to say, okay, they want to move forward. This is how we need to step in and help to make sure that they can sort of meet their goals. So, mahalo. What I'd like to start off next with is to talk a little bit about the history of Kaiapuni. Can you guys see that? Really easy? Is that better? Okay. So to talk briefly about Hawaiian language education in the public education system, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the current conditions of Kaiapuni in the Department of Education, and then we'll talk about the future of Kaiapuni education in the Department of Education. So very briefly, previous to 1896, Hawaiian language existed within the public education schools, and so the students that were in the schools were learning in Hawaiian, and their instruction was provided to them in Hawaiian. At that time, Hawaiians enjoyed a very high literacy rate, and they were doing all kinds of things before some of the things that were happening west of the Rockies, before the people that Anuenue was doing. So it was basically a pretty successful Hawaiian language public education system. In 1896, Hawaiian language was banned from public schools, and any schools that wanted to function within the Hawaiian language had to do so using private funding. So basically what happened was, in terms of Hawaiian schema, Hawaiian understanding of their world, it was kind of ripped away from them when their language was taken away from them in the public education schools. And between 1896 and 1961, there was no Hawaiian, or very limited Hawaiian language education in public education. That even goes on to the college level as well. In 1961 to 1978, there was a huge renaissance, and this information I get from Dr. Noea Warner, who was my professor, and this is part of his work, this brief history. But basically he said, if the people in the Kauna'oa, all the people in the corners of Hawaii didn't continue to speak Hawaiian in hiding, we probably wouldn't have Hawaiian language today. If the Kumu didn't continue to teach Kumu in hiding, we probably wouldn't have Hawaiian language today. If our kupuna were not people who could see the future and didn't start to record their language in Hawaiian language newspapers, we probably wouldn't be enjoying the kind of language revitalization that we're having today. And so during this era between 1961 and 1978, there was a huge renaissance taking place for Hawaiian culture and Hawaiian language, and Hawaiian ways of knowing was starting to be focused on not just in the homes anymore, but starting to happen in the colleges, where people that were in the colleges were saying, this is important enough, we need to put this back into public education. And so there's a movement in the state government to start to appreciate those things within public education. In 1978, during the Constitutional Convention, Hawaiian was made an official language of the state. And the grassroots effort with the ALOHA started to get public education, Hawaiian language back into public education. They started their first preschools, and then when those students needed a place to go, they went to the legislature and said, open up public education in Hawaiian. And in 1987, we have our first Kaiapuni schools on Oahu at Lana'i Elementary and on Hawaii Island at Kealoha Elementary. So today we have 20 sites statewide, including 6 of those sites being charter schools. And we have about 2,400 students enrolled in the 20 sites across the state, K-12. In 1990, a group of people got together, some of the leaders, and some of them are here today. They established what's called the AHA-Koleo. And the AHA-Koleo was a statewide consortium of stakeholders, including parents, including community members from the universities and the Native Hawaiian organizations in the community, DOE representatives, teachers, and administrators. They pulled a group together and called themselves the AHA-Koleo. And basically what they were was an advocacy group to continue to push for supports and services within the public education system on behalf of our Kaiapuni students. What you'll see now is the AHA-Koleo is moving forward in partnership with the department and the Board of Education to make some better strides for Kaiapuni education. Okay, so you'll see that Kaiapuni's been around for 26 years, 26 or 27 years in the Department of Education. Previous to that, at the Kaho'ohalahala, they've been 5 years previous to that. So Hawaiian language revitalization in education has been happening a while now. In 1994, a long-range plan was created. We went to the Board of Education and they created a specific policy for Hawaiian language immersion program in the Department of Education. It was accepted and a long-range plan was created. In that long-range plan, there was a bunch of things that were supposed to take place to continue to support the growth of the schools. And between 1994 and 2006, we only saw a small amount of growth because what they did was they established the office that I work in, and sort of all of that Welina came to the office that I work in, and basically the stakeholder group voice was kind of cut off. And so recently, 2010, we reestablished the ALOHA strength and are using them as the voice in our office to help inform how to move forward now. So where we're at now is the current conditions of our schools. In 2010, we held a teacher retreat in Kauai. There was about 40 teachers that work in the Kaiapuni program at the teacher retreat. And basically, the teachers were frustrated with the support that they were getting because of national movement around state standards. Initially in 2001 with No Child Left Behind, and then the movement towards Race to the Top and Common Core state standards. And what teachers were saying was they were struggling with trying to essentially follow two masters. One of those masters was that program goal that was established on Hawaiian language revitalization, Hawaiian culture revitalization, Hawaiian ways of knowing. And then a set of standards that was built on Western ideologies, Western ways of knowing, Western languages. And so the teachers were sort of frustrated because they were trying to figure out how to do both in one school without giving up one over the other. And so at this retreat, what was decided was we needed to go back to our kakou, back to our foundation, and take a look at the direction of the program as it existed, and evaluate what needed to change and what kinds of priorities needed to be made in order to move in a better direction for the students. And so, at the time, what was happening was we have a Kaiapuni education that exists in the Department of Education. And the head of that Department of Education is our superintendent. And above our superintendent is the Board of Education. So Board of Education makes the policy. The superintendent tells everybody in the department what they're supposed to do to make it happen. Currently the superintendent is Catherine Makeoshi, and she basically has two arms. One arm is part of a set of state offices. The other arm is part of what we call complex areas, district offices in the complexes. And those two arms do specific things. The state arm supports whatever the superintendent says we need to do. Other offices that fall into that arm include where we're housed, Office of Curriculum and Instruction, Student Support. We have people like Physical Services, Human Resources, Information and Technology, all of those things. And we're all supposed to be a supportive system to the schools. On the other arm, we have what we call our complex areas. And what you'll see is the boxes way at the bottom, the kind of light purple boxes, those are all of the schools. And this is sort of a statewide look at where our schools are at. So we have 15 complexes in the state. And then we have our charter school administration office as well. In the 15 complexes across the state, we have schools in 9 of the complex areas. statewide. So we have schools on Maui, we have schools on Molokai, schools on Hawaii, there's schools on Hawaii Island, and then Oahu. Don't have any schools here that are in immersion. We don't have anything on, okay, yeah, I can just go back a whole lot here. But, so, and we're kind of scattered across the state. So the way we function is all of these schools kind of fall into this line in terms of the chain of command. So at the school level, the person in charge is our school principal. At the complex level, we have our complex area superintendent, and they all report back to the superintendent. Where our office is contained, we're way on the bottom here, our language immersion program office, and then we report to a director who is part of the curriculum instruction branch. And she reports to an assistant superintendent at that blue box, and then they report to the superintendent. And so there's two different arms taking place, and one arm is doing one thing, and the other arm is doing another thing, and they aren't really talking to each other. And so what we find is, we end up with a bunch of fragmented services that aren't focused on the school. And so, us in our office, DOE state level, we're doing one thing. The complex areas are doing one thing. Parents are doing one thing. Schools are doing one thing. Government policy is forcing us to do certain things. And it's all this fragmentation of stuff that's taking place without a common understanding of what Kaiapuni education is really about. Besides that, we also have fragmentation in terms of the role groups. So at the school level, parents weren't really talking with the principals and the teachers and all of those things to work together for the students. And so you can see that in terms of support to the school, we were having a difficult time trying to make sure that all the focus was placed on the students and the students' needs. So in 2010, when this group met, the goal was to sort of flip that hierarchy and make sure that everybody's working together as the foundation to support the kids, to support the haumana. In order to do that, we need to make sure that people were at the table that needed to be at the table. Initially, at the reestablishment of the ALOHA in 2011, we needed to make sure that 20 schools were represented at these meetings and their voices were heard, and that parents from those schools and people in the community and the universities were there, and administrators were there, and teachers were there. And I think at our last meeting in Molokai, we finally achieved that. We had all 20 schools present at the last ALOHA meeting. And the purpose of that is to make sure that everybody's at the table when we start to move in a direction. And I think where we're at now is we're starting to get to a better place in terms of getting rid of the fragmentation and doing more of a collective approach to supporting our kids. In 2010, again, we pulled the team together after that teacher retreat. We said, okay, let's pull a team together, let's evaluate the needs, let's evaluate the direction of the program, and then let's set a new course. And that new course started with having to revisit our vision. Currently, the direction that we're moving in is to reestablish our vision with this idea in mind. And since I have some of the other people from the writing team here, I'm going to ask them to popcorn in and help to provide some of the background information on the program. They're shaking their head. So, Kamo'e. So I'm going to ask Kamo'e to come up and share the vision and the mission with you in terms of the new direction.
Aloha. This was our vision statement we came up with, and in the document it's left without an English translation. and we expected it to stand on its own. But I can give you some of the mana'o that went into that as we put this together. Okay, oyamono means something continues on. Kapono and pono can mean many different things, but sort of loosely translated as what's right in this case. So what's right has the ability to continue on. Opalahui kanaka, and lahui is a group of people, generally a nation or an ethnic group, or in this sense, you notice that the kanaka is not capitalized. When it's capitalized, it can refer specifically to Hawaiians, Native Hawaiians, kanaka maoli. But we left it like that because it can also represent all humankind, kanaka. And meaning that group of people, all people. Ika na'awao Hawaii, and na'awao can be translated as wisdom, intelligence. Literally it means the insights that are enlightened through various ways, both educationally, spiritually, and so forth. And that's the na'awao Hawaii of the people, the aina, the plants, the animals, everything that is Hawaii. That continues, that knowledge continues, or has the ability to continue when everything is right, and it will make the lahui kanaka pono through that understanding and knowledge.
Your mission. You're going to talk about the mission.
Any questions on that? Okay. Okay, this is that was the vision statement. This is the mission statement, and you know? Questions? So empowering students through all this education, empowering students to self-determine, meaning on their own volition, to determine community and familial stewardship and what that means to them. So ohana, the family, and the community. There are various definitions of community. Our community that they may define may include all of the plants and animals in the area where we live. That's part of our community, rather than just kanaka. So, empowering them through this na'awao Hawaii to make these decisions on their own. So, as you can see, this educational philosophy and system is very much about giving that, empowering or giving that power back to the haumana of the school, and through the haumana to the ohana, to the Makua and siblings and so forth. Okay. Wow.
So focusing on that and the vision, that as our vision, and this mission, we turned to looking at some strategic priorities. What are the things that needed to change in the system? And so we started to identify some of the strategic priorities that we needed to focus on. What we were not seeing was a value being placed on Hawaiian language, culture, and knowledge in the public education system. Everything was weighed on, and this is specifically around that shift towards state standards, no child left behind law, federal law, those kinds of things. We saw a shift away from Hawaiian things and focus more on Western ideas of education. And so we wanted to make sure that while there is a value to that, we also don't want to give up the importance of Hawaiian language, Hawaiian culture, and Hawaiian ways of knowing in our education system. And that we should be able to place those things as priorities in all of our decision making and all of our educational decision making for our students in preparing them to move forward. We also needed to make sure that all stakeholders were included and were sitting at the table, sharing their mana'o, and then receiving mana'o as well, in terms of a partnership between navigating public education, state standards, and the value of Hawaiian language, culture, and ways of knowing. And so we wanted to make sure that stakeholders, inclusive of parents, teachers, administrators, community, were at the table as a priority. That we've done through the ALOHA. We wanted to make sure that we're directing all educational resources to the vision of Kaiapuni education, to that idea of he oia mono kapono kalahui kanaka I Kanaoa Hawaii. When you have to make a decision on how you're going to allocate resources, you keep that in your mind, that vision in your mind when you make that decision, rather than only data on how well our students perform on a translated test, something like that. So thinking hard about how we make decisions to make sure that we can achieve that vision. We also wanted to focus on improving the way the content, the curriculum, the instruction, and the assessment was taking place in our schools, because with the shift away from Hawaiian things and more towards state standards, it sort of pulled the rug out from underneath our teachers, because they were doing what they came into the program to do, and they were told, okay, you're not allowed to do that anymore because that's not where we're placing our value. And so we need to take a look back at what's happening currently in our schools, some of the understandings that our teachers have about what they're teaching in the classrooms, some of the understandings about what parents expect in terms of what their students will walk away with, and everybody getting onto the same page about how we're going to do this thing called Kaiapuni education in the Department of Education. This idea of research-based practices using qualitative and or quantitative data was really important, because there was a huge focus on being able to quantify. Give me a number. Tell me how well they're doing in terms of a percentage. How many kids are passing? How many kids are failing? And those kinds of things. Which was difficult to measure on small populations like the Kaiapuni schools. When we have students taking a test in 3rd grade and there's only like 200 kids statewide taking that test, making some assumptions about how those students perform using data that was derived from a population that's like 20,000 students was not really the best way to understand how our students perform. And so we wanted to make sure that we included this idea of qualitative data. We understand the quality. What are the kids telling us about what they're learning and what they know, and how are they showing that in terms of the way they present themselves to their communities and provide service back to their communities and those kinds of things. And so we wanted to make sure that there was an equal weight to qualitative data as well as the quantitative stuff. And then the final priority was to make sure that the department was responsive to the needs of the schools in order to meet the vision. And when we say the department, we mean everybody that works in the department. Myself, the person that works in the superintendent's office, a person that sits in the principalship, a person that sits in the office drafting the POs for the teachers to pay their bills, a person that is helping to keep the kids lined up in lunch, making sure that everybody understands their accountability to Kaiapuni education and not just kind of going with the flow of mainstream education. And so this has sort of been an educational effort statewide to make sure that everybody understands that this is where we're going, this is sort of our new direction, in hopes that later on down the line, you know, nobody's going to come up to us and say, oh, I didn't know that that's where we were going. So that's why this is out now. Because our goal is to make sure that we're maximizing the student learning and reaching that vision. So some of the changes that have to take place within the department is to not only focus ourselves as stakeholders, as a parent, as a person that works at the university, as a principal, but make sure we focus the people that work within the department on student learning. And so all of those offices that provide services to all schools need to also make sure they focus on, when they're talking about providing services to Kaiapuni schools, they understand the vision and they understand the mission of Kaiapuni schools. So when they make their decisions on how to hire a teacher, they know that they have to make considerations for the Kaiapuni context, right? When they make a decision on how much to spend on the bus to make sure all of the kids that want to be at a Kaiapuni school can get to a Kaiapuni school, they know how to do that, right? When a parent walks into the cafeteria, to the office, and says, I want to enroll my kid in kindergarten, the parent is given the option of saying, do you want your child educated in English, or do you want your child educated in Hawaiian? Because we have both. Those things are not happening in the department, and what we need to do is to start to flip that and start to make sure that everybody's on board and making sure that they understand their responsibility to the success of Kaiapuni education in the department. And basically, when we start to get into the content of stuff, we want to make sure that what we're doing is we're establishing a lens, what we're calling a Kaiapuni lens. The way our students see the world is founded on Hawaiian things, Hawaiian language, Hawaiian culture, Hawaiian ways of knowing, Hawaiian history, from a Hawaiian perspective. And making sure that they can engage globally from a Hawaiian perspective, whether or not you're Hawaiian. And so the focus areas that we're going to look at in terms of language, culture, understanding, and being sort of are centered around these big ideas of making sure that there's Hawaiian language and literacy in our schools, that the curriculum and the instruction are focused on these ideas, and that assessment also is taking place to make sure that we're achieving those things. And using this lens, and this lens shows up in different ways at the different levels of the department. For a student, they might be able to maybe use, let me just pick one. So we'll take a stab at the culture. I went to a classroom, the teacher's sitting back there the other day, to do an observation. And the teacher pressed the principal to allow me to come in and sit with the principal on the observation. Because that teacher knew that something was going to happen that her non-Hawaiian speaking principal wouldn't be able to see. And sure enough, when those students engage in their discussion around ideas of how mo'olelo, the things that are embedded in Hawaiian stories, show up in current day issues, I was floored. I was absolutely floored by the discussion that took place amongst the students. It was just absolutely amazing. And I thought, how is a non-Hawaiian language speaking person going to understand that if they don't even know what the kids are saying? And how are they going to understand the level of rigor that takes place in terms of that critical thinking process and the analysis that it takes to think about those things and make comparisons and make connections to their own lives, to a mo'olelo that existed thousands of years ago? And so I think that kind of understanding in terms of student lens, understanding who they are and seeing through their lens is very, very important. Somebody like my assistant superintendent, my boss above me, I don't know that she has the ability to view learning in that way. And whether or not she has that ability to view what took place in that classroom and bridge it, not only for Hawaiian context, but for the context that you brought up around County Court, state standards, and making those connections to learning on the two sides of that fence. So super important. What we want to do is we want to use that lens, and through that lens, we engage with all of the external stuff that takes place around public education. And so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to invite maybe Kamo'oa back up. Because what we're going to go and get into real quick is the different sections. We're going to talk about what Hawaiian language looks like in a Kaiapuni classroom. Then we're going to talk about the content of the curriculum and focus areas and Hawaiian strategies and those kinds of things in a Kaiapuni school. And then we're going to talk about assessment in a Kaiapuni school. And hopefully it'll set you guys on a path to understanding where we're going in terms of Kaiapuni education, and hopefully give you some information about that you need to make some decisions today. So, Kamo'oa, if you can share the olawa, please. Which I think is next. Okay, sorry. I'm going to formally introduce him. They were going to send them Kaho'oha was going to do that, but I'll formally introduce him now. Kamo'oa is, I think, first and foremost, a parent of Kaiapuni students from the first class at YL. And he's a professor at BYUH in Lana'i, and he's been part of this game from the beginning. And also with his wife, who is Kauna'oa, walked in the back. When we went to Kauai in 2010, I think that was the first time he came back to one of our retreats, and I kept telling Kauna'oa, tell your husband come. Tell your husband come. Because we need that kind of those people that have that history to be sitting at the table and helping us guys to make some decisions about what we're doing. So he currently has, I don't know how many kids he had go through the program, like 5 or 6, something like that. And then he currently has the same amount or more Kula in the program going through. So I'd like to welcome him on.
Please hold your applause to the end. I don't want to say with that. But mahalo, my wife and I from Lana'i in the back are very happy to be here and be invited by company to come. A little bit about our background again. So we were part of the brave group of parents that threw our students into this immersion program that was brand new. Despite many family members, community members telling us that we were foolish, to say the least, that our kids would turn out somehow retarded and backward. That learning Hawaiian was like going backward, that they needed to learn English to get ahead, which is what our kupuna were told, yeah. But I was talking to one of the Makua over there. Our oldest child, well, our oldest 2 children were in that first class. It was a combined kindergarten and first grade class. Our son is the oldest, so he started in first grade. He'd already attended kindergarten in English, and then started Kaiapuni in first grade. And they both transitioned from Kaiapuni to Kamehameha schools at grade 7. And so they went on to Kamehameha schools, but both of them went on to the university, where I'm now at, BYU Hawaii. They were Hawaiian studies majors in college. And then my son went on to law school at UH, completed law school, sat the bar exam, and is now a lawyer, and is working with Kamehameha schools right now. But my point is that he didn't turn out retarded. He wasn't held back. And just for the record, my wife and I have 5 children. I don't have any more, and she doesn't have any more, just the 5. But we have double. We have 10 more opuna so far. Our oldest 3 children are married, and 1, 2, 3, 4, I think at least half of them are in immersion schools. The other half are too young to be in school yet, but they will be. So we have started a trend in our family and in our langui to do this. I remember my wife's uncle saying in the early stages when he would meet with us, he'd say, "How's the revolution going?" And I would look at him puzzled and say, "What are you talking about?" He says, "You, your family, your kids, that's a revolution right there." I went, oh, I never thought about that. We just wanted our kids to learn Hawaiian because we felt as parents that that was important for them in their future. And our children now that they've grown up, got married and so forth, have thanked us. At the time, they didn't appreciate, and I think we're all like that, yeah. We don't appreciate it at the time, but they've come back to thank us time and time again. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for what you did for us. Thank you for driving us all the way from Hau'ula across the other side of the island to Waiau every day, back and forth, for all those years. Anyway, we have lots of stories, and hopefully we can share some more of those later on, but let's move on. So, talking about the olelo as the core of everything that we're doing. Hawaiian language immersion, or Kaiapuni, is not just about language, but language is at its core in all things. So, one way I describe it is like kakou. Kakou is an important part of our body, but it doesn't move our muscles, but it allows all that to happen. If we don't have the kakou moving around, then we will make. Right? So the kakou is the olelo. It gets to every part of the body and it takes the energy that it needs to operate, and then it takes the waste out and so forth, so it functions that way. That's how critical the olelo is what we do, but it's not just about the olelo, because our kids are learning the na'auao, which is everything. Okay. So Hawaiian language is the key to accessing the knowledge of our kupuna. It is the basis for understanding and engaging the world around us as Hawaiians. And that's the world as our kupuna saw it generations ago, and also in today's world that is rapidly changing and will continue at an accelerated pace to change. And here on Lanai, I'm sure you folks know all about that, yeah? Okay, the goals: fully develop all facets of Hawaiian language. So, another short story. When I was first beginning to teach Olelo Hawaii, one of my students was married to a girl, wahine from Tahiti, and she spoke Tahitian. So he would go home from class, and she would ask him, "Oh, what did you learn today?" And he would say, whatever language pattern or so forth we learned, and she'd go, "Oh, okay." And he'd say, "Why?" And she'd say, "Oh, that's the old way. We don't say that. We don't use that anymore. This is Tahitian." So the thing is, Tahitian as a living language has continued unbroken in Tahiti. Hawaii, the common use of the language has been almost frozen in time nearly 200 years ago, or at least 100 years to 150 years. We've got a big gap that kind of needs to be filled. But that's what that means when fully developed is we're still developing the language. We're still learning more about the olelo of our kupuna and engaging that into this modern world that we all live in now. Develop a pedagogy of teaching and learning in Hawaiian. So how do we teach and learn Hawaiian? We know that our kupuna learned it mai ke kahiwaha i ke kahiwaha. So from one mouth to the other, that's how they transfer the language. Now, what are the ways that we teach Hawaiian? And studying and learning more about that. Create an environment of olelo Hawaii. So within the classroom, and I've seen this with my own children. So as they're going through Kaiapuni classes and so forth, and they're engaging, their teachers are having them speak in Hawaiian and speaking with their friends, but then they step out of the classroom and what happens? There's the rest of the world out there that doesn't speak Hawaiian anymore, and they start to question a little bit, and within their minds they say, oh, most of them, they are orally bilingual, so they can speak in English, but, they don't see this as additive, that they now have two, but they just see, oh, I like what that guy have over there. All right, so creating that environment of a little Hawaii that raises the way we view Hawaiian to a higher level, that it's not like, oh yeah, I speak Hawaiian. Yes, I am a little Hawaiian. Not with in a prideful way, but in a confident way that is part of you and who you are. develop a curriculum that fosters the core value statement, which we talked about earlier, about Olelo and the knowledge. Okay, Olelo, pedagogy of learning and instruction. At the center there, that pedagogy, which is the way we teach, and then the surrounding one, the target and create language opportunities, which are important both inside of class and outside, in the family and community. Practice skill development, contextualize language instruction, and continuous language study. Since the time my wife and I and our family began our journey in Kaiapuni, I was convinced then, and I'm still convinced, that the life of the language exists in the ohana. The school is only a kokua. Okay, it's only a kokua. So parents, realize that you have the primary kuleana to instruct and teach your children everything that they need to know. Some of us, we don't have enough skill in Olelo, so we bring them to school to help us as parents educate our children. But it also means we have that kuleana as parents to say, hey, I gotta go learn Hawaiian. I gotta do everything I can to learn along with my keiki. And just expect that they're gonna learn a lot faster than you. Because their minds are like empty sponges, and they're going to pick it up so fast, and you think, man, oh my goodness, taking off. And what was that word again? What did he say? But you have to engage. That's the main thing. All right, curriculum instruction, culturally appropriate learning environments. Okay, we talked. Kawi's talked a little bit about that. That it has to be relevant to the culture and so forth. The worldview of the Hawaiians. Otherwise, you can't cut and paste the English curriculum in a Hawaiian language. You just can't. It doesn't work. So it has to be in its own environment. It has to be culturally appropriate content and pedagogies, the way we teach as well. So some of you know the Olelo no Eau, Nanaka Maka Olohi Kapepeau Pa'akawaha. That's a Hawaiian teaching pedagogy, teaching and learning. Okay, and I was taught like that, many lessons. You know, you don't ask questions at a certain point in that learning process because your question won't be a dumb question, but it'll be premature. Watch until we get to the end, when you got all the instruction, then you try it, and then if you have questions, you can ask questions. So forth. That's the kind of, and there are many other pedagogies that go along with Hawaiian instruction. Learning environments. Develop and maintain variety of Hawaiian language context, which we talked about. Promote the use of Hawaiian practices and traditions, Hawaiian worldviews and histories, and support unique educational needs of our Hawaiian children. Okay, and here's another way of looking at that pedagogy. You notice the center is ALOHA. And Kahele, ALOHA. Okay, Kahele and her small team on our writing group came up with this beautiful explanation of Hawaiian pedagogy in A'o, or teaching and learning, so I'll turn the time over to her to explain this after call.
I just wanted to make sure I introduced her before she came on. So Kahele Dugo is also a parent. I first met Kahele when she taught at Kaiapuni Anuenue on Oahu Island way back, I don't know, a few years ago. Yeah, that's like over 10 years ago. Kahele is also a parent of students that are in middle school, high school, and elementary at this point. She's also a professor at the University of Hawaii Maui campus. And I'm trying to encourage her to come back to the Department of Education in the role of a school administrator so she can be principal one day at one of my schools. And just real quickly, I want to make sure that you guys understand that this is what, when we talk about evaluating a Kaiapuni school, we are going to be looking for evidence of these kinds of things existing in the school. So in terms of Lanai and your students and your keiki, we want to make sure that you guys understand that these are the kinds of things that we want to see in your schools guys decide to move forward with the Kaiapuni school, so how?
Aloha kakou. Mahalo nui ke kono ana yamako e hene mai ke ala ka ana like I kahana. So again, this is a program guide. As Kale mentioned before, a group of parents, educators, teachers got together and we're talking about what do we want our schools to look like, and how can we help schools create a Kaiapuni school. And this is really what we're talking about. So for curriculum and instruction, again, we identified the different areas. So basically it was the where, the environment, the place we learn in. So when you walk into a school, when you walk into a Kaiapuni school, what do you want to hear? What do you want to see? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And check the back one. So when we talk about that, like, I know I had some questions about, well, where would our school be? And, you know, what would it look like? And where would we start? And how would we do all of these things? Well, hopefully this can help you kind of figure that out. What we would like to see in a Kaiapuni school is that you see language being spoken everywhere, not just in the classroom, but in the cafeteria and on the playground and between the kids in all kinds of different contexts. We would like to see the use of Hawaiian practices and traditions as determined by your community. This is a guide. This is not something saying you gotta do this. This is saying these are the kinds of things you should consider doing as a Kaiapuni school. We should be able to, as a Kaiapuni school, really look at the needs of Hawaiian children. When we talk about not just educational needs, but social needs, identity, when we're talking about culture and history and all of those kinds of things. And also to promote Hawaiian worldviews and history. So when we talk about, you know, I always ask this question, so how many of us know the story of Cinderella? Raise your hand. How many of us know the story of Lana'i High? Oh, that's pretty good actually, that's good to teach us. And usually what it's a way to show that we know a lot about other worldviews and we know way less about our own. And Kaiapuni schools should be a place where those worldviews are promoted. Okay, next. So pedagogy is about how you teach. And as Kamo'e stated, ALOHA is in the middle. And you know, ALOHA has been used in many different ways. But ALOHA is an action. Yeah, it's not a feeling. You know, you don't just stand there and say, oh, ALOHA. It's what you do, and how you do it, and why you do it. That's ALOHA, the way we interact with each other. And we identified different ways of learning, basically, different Hawaiian ways of learning. And I won't go through all of them, but some of them are familiar to us. Ho'ike, we hear that a lot, and this is a way of demonstrating knowledge. Yeah, often through doing something. It could be through making something. Ho'a'o, yeah, which is to apply and create knowledge. Ho'omana, to exercise empowerment. So what we tried to do was identify Hawaiian methods, Hawaiian ways of learning, Hawaiian ways of showing knowledge. And this is not to say that we cannot incorporate all kinds of other things, but it is saying that if it is a Kaiapuni school, we should see these elements in teaching and learning in the school. And that ALOHA is embedded in all of it. And we've been, you know, talking to people around the state, and somebody made this comment about, you know, in regular school, English school, you don't have to love your teacher. In Kaiapuni, you gotta have ALOHA for your teacher in order for it to work. And when you talk to students and parents and teachers, that is really something that is different. I'm not saying that there's never ALOHA in an English school, but it's not that crucial element of a classroom. And in Kaiapuni, it is. there is ALOHA. There has to be ALOHA in that space for all of these things to happen. So it's a very important part of Kaiapuni education. And then the content. And again, what we're trying to do is to identify the Hawaiian parts of content. Because as we know, there's going to be way more to education than this. We talk about Common Core, or whatever the flavor of the Department of Education is for a specific, point in time. However, what we need to see, or what we would like to see in a Kaiapuni school, is that when we talk about what we teach, when we choose curriculum, we should be considering mo'olelo, which we are saying is like our histories and our genealogies. Are we saying we only teach our histories and our genealogies? No, but it cannot be a Kaiapuni school unless we are teaching our histories and our genealogies. And then community gets to decide whatever else gets taught. Lohona, which is practices in stewardship, that's another big part of what we envision Kaiapuni to be, and it's really teaching our kids how to engage in our world in a Hawaiian way, as we determine in this modern era. Akua, which we're labeling as universal relationships, and really it is about being part of the larger picture, whatever you determine that larger picture to be. That's a concept that we would like to see. Ohana, of course, is very important. And then also Aina, our relationship. And we didn't really, when you look at this entire scheme, it is about sort of our world, our worldview, every aspect of our worldview. So as teachers, or even as parents, even though this is meant as sort of a curriculum and instruction piece, I think even when I look at it as a parent, how do I parent my children, right? To make them aware and to make them realize the different parts of our world and how they engage with it.
The concepts that are part of assessment that are important in terms of Hawaiian understanding in Kaiapuni education. And then I think, where did Kauna'oa was? Do you want to break after that for lunch? And then have the panel come back to answer questions after? Yeah? Or do you want to just go through with the panel right after? So we'll have assessment and then we'll invite the panel to come up and answer questions that you guys might have after this section. I'd like to introduce Kaliho Crew. He was a former teacher in Kaiapuni education, currently works at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in the College of Education, hopefully making space for these kinds of ideas to exist in teacher preparation programs so that we can get teachers prepared to come in to teach our kids and to teach your keiki in our schools. Kalehua is currently working on his dissertation, and hopefully he can get him into that spot so that he can make a change on behalf of our schools.
I think this is going to be really quick because for me it's more about understanding the philosophy of assessment. And it's funny because I've been looking at, I've been looking at the flags up there today. And that to me is part of the goal of assessment, is to be able to understand that there are different ways of assessing, and none of them are better or worse than each other. And up here what we're going to see is that we've talked about varied forms of assessment. And when we talk about assessment right now, most people think of what's shown in the newspaper. So the standardized testing, the hoisting assessment, the HSA scores that are put into the newspaper. Well, there are many different ways to assess children. And first and foremost, it's part of our kuleana to assess our keiki. So I think as far as as you guys embark on this journey, understanding that philosophically, it's not just about buying into the rhetoric that someone else can tell me how my child is doing. It's all of our kuleana here, especially before you guys start, as parents, to jump into this, understanding that I am a part of the assessment. I have a kuleana, like my child has a kuleana, and when my child is assessed in whatever varied forms that we have, that is a reflection of all of us. It's not just a reflection of school. It's not just a reflection of the department. It's a reflection of what all of our collective kuleana is, because this is such a huge undertaking. So purposeful assessment, and much of this is self-explanatory. Collaborative. Right now, assessment is not collaborative. It is mandated from the federal government. The way it's mandated, it's in federal law, and right now the department is just good soldier and saluting, doing the HSA. What changes with Kaiapuni is that the question about Common Core state standards is that they're developed and leveled for monolingual learners. So once you throw in another language, our students develop completely different. They're not going to pick up, they're not going to learn both languages at the same time as a monolingual student. It's almost physically impossible. And we shouldn't be pushing them to learn that way. What we should be doing is understanding and collaborating together for us to have a better understanding of how our children develop. Because that expertise has not been researched, has not been developed. So there's nobody out there, not the federal government, not the state government, who can tell us that our children should be assessed in this way based upon these levels, because their levels are determined, again, by monolingual learners, and ours are by trilingual learners as well, many schools. Very informed is that one-shot state assessment should not be the only method by which our children are assessed. Our children should be assessed in many different ways, including standardized assessments as that. They may not be punished for it in the same way, but there are also cultural assessments as well that are put in there. And one example that I talk about for the next one, or individual and collective, is that right now, what we do is we test each child individually, as individuals, and then we add up their scores as though that's a reflection of the school. Well, for me, I'm hoping that later on down the line, that as a part of these varied forms of assessment, that we can start having children assess themselves together, be a part of the reflection, be a part of the discussion and the engagement. Because one of the most important things that was put up earlier on the slide was ohana. And how do you assess a child's ability to function in a ohana? Is a child just take on his or her kuleana, and mommy takes her kuleana, daddy takes his kuleana, and we never engage together? There's a missing section of assessment that we haven't been reaching. And that's the core of our content, that's the core of our culture, which is interaction, dialogue, how children work together. And that's something, just as an example, between individual and collective. Okay, everybody know. Mahalo kami.
So, in reestablishing the target, we're hoping that by prioritizing Hawaiian language as a focus and using Hawaiian ike as our knowledge base, making good, transparent, inclusive decisions, and making sure that we always focus on the kids first. Hopefully, we can get ourselves to a place where we can start to gain some traction. So at this point, I'd like to invite those of you that are on the panel to kind of make your way up front. And I'm going to ask Mr. Naumu, Charles Naumu, who is the principal at Kaiapuni or Anuenue, for about 2 more days because he's going into retirement. I'm going to have him come up and share a few ideas, and then we'll open up the panel for discussion.
Aloha kakou. Thank you all. I asked for this time because you have been patient listening to us talk educational needs and language. But let me take a few minutes to make it a little bit more specific and a little bit more personal. I've been at Anuenue as principal, I forget how many years, but my connection with Lanai is on our school campus. There is the Nakua family. And some of you remember Suki, Auntie Suki. And she did so much for Anuenue. And because of her contributions, when I came for her funeral, 3 years ago, whatever it was, and I saw Kumu, and I also attended the Hawaiian church, and the services were in Hawaiian. I said, Lanai is ready for immersion. And because we had connections between the Department of Education and Kamehameha schools for summer school, a couple years ago we started the summer school program, which many of your children attended and have been progressing. And I'm very excited to see it being established into the regular school. And I'm so excited and so happy for you folks, because as was mentioned, the immersion program, Hawaiian language immersion program at Anuenue, for example, we have about 80 some odd percent are Hawaiian, part Hawaiian, but the other 10 or 15% are non-Hawaiian. They don't have Hawaiian blood, they don't have the Hawaiian kakou, but they come and they learn. And many of our students have gone on to private schools and the universities and other things, which can be proud of. And I think Lanai can do that same kind of a thing. This meeting reminds me that we have no geographic area that belongs to Anuenue School. The house across the parking lot, the Nakua house, if you have children there, they belong at Kaho'ohalahala Elementary. So we at Anuenue have to go out and recruit or invite families to come. And so this meeting reminds me of a recruitment to come to immersion, because when the students come to immersion, I tell the parents, it's like them carrying 2 book bags or 2 backpacks. They have the English backpack, which they have in their regular society, but also the Hawaiian backpack that they're carrying, or school bag they have in school. And in the beginning, it's hard for them to carry those 2 bags, both English and Hawaiian. But as they get stronger, or as they get older, they become stronger and better. And you will hear in the current Department of Education language, college, career ready. The other one is citizenship ready, being of good character. And all of these things are included. And the way that I try to show it is how we try to help get our students both proficient in Hawaiian, but also globally and internationally ready. Let me show you one diagram and I'll be done. M is mala'o, or kindergarten in Hawaiian. And the model we follow is that for these 5 years, they focus on Hawaiian. In 5th grade, is when English is introduced. And so we need to catch them up in English. And if we're doing it correctly, they'll be better in English and better in Hawaiian when they're done with us in your program. I hope Aku will bless you folks and help you folks and bless your children and your families. Mahalo.
So we'll invite the panel to come to the front and sit at the table. I'd like to continue with the introduction just to make sure that everybody was properly introduced. So as you guys are coming up, I'll introduce you guys one at a time. In the meantime, if you can get your questions ready, what we'll try to do is we'll popcorn back and forth. I think we only have one microphone. So you can either come to the front and ask your question, or stand up where you're at. I'll facilitate the question and answer. And then we'll kind of share the microphone back and forth. So we have Keoni and Inciong here, who is my boss. He's the administrator of the Hawaiian Education Program Section of the Department of Education. We have Baba'i, who is currently a parent, a former teacher, and currently the vice principal at Kula Kaiapuni Anuenue. We have Kauna'oa, who I also met when I used to teach her at Anuenue, who is a parent, a current teacher, and a very strong advocate for Kaiapuni education. We have Lynn, who is the principal at Nahienaena Elementary, and who's really taking on an extra charge this year because her school is K-5, kindergarten, 5th grade, but she's decided that she wants to keep Hawaiian language education available to all kids on her side. So she opened up the 6th grade to help the middle school for next year's transition. So mahalo, Lynn. And then we have, again, Naumu, Spitalsky, and Kauna'oa, Kaiapuni, or Garcia. Sorry, I do who are here also to answer some questions in terms of the teacher role, and because they're from Lana'i, I think it's important to have them here. So, this is your guest panel with those that are introduced. Oh, and Mr. Kinoshita, sorry, is over here, and maybe can you sit with them by the right to and so at this point, we'd like to open up for questions. Does anybody have any questions for the panel? You have a lot of experience here. You have people who have opened schools. You have people who have started their KP at the first classrooms, that are currently in the program, that are doing work in teacher preparation at the universities, that are doing curriculum development, that understand the system. So any kind of questions, throw them out here and so the question is whether or not there's a minimum of students to start at Kula Kaiapuni School. And I'll pass it over to the systems person.
Actually, I started off as an English program as a certified teacher, and then came on Immersion teacher to where I am now. But there, as long as there are, the way we look at it, as long as there is enough interest in starting the school or the program, then we meet like this, and then we can establish. So there's no minimum amount, as long as we have interest in it, and then there's also commitment to the program.
Aloha. I'm Papahana. He's my roommate. And as was mentioned before, we are parents of the first children of the first class. I'd like to add to what was said about the minimum. We live in La'i. I'm from the island of Hawaii, but we live in they asked that they be allowed to continue at Kaho'ohalahala High and Intermediate. The administrators at the time said, no, we have no room, we have no teacher, we have no curriculum. You have to go to Anuenue, which is an hour and a half away, or Makua, which is about 45 minutes away. And so these students felt that it was their right to learn Hawaiian in their moku and could not understand why they had to go away. My husband mentioned a little bit about this, and I'm going there to illustrate what Keoni is seeing. So they and their parents stood fast together, and they said, no, we are not going out of our moku. We are going to learn in our moku. What eventually happened was there was a lot of dialogue between the parents and the department, and the department was not going to open the program. And the parents really felt that that was the right thing, the important thing to do. So, through the efforts of the families, through letters to the Board of Education, and to anyone who would listen, they appeared, these students, and they were just 6th graders going into 7th grade. They testified at the Board of Education hearing, and they shared the testimonies in Hawaiian and English as to the fact that they couldn't understand why they had to leave their moku to learn the language of the Lanai. There were only 5 students. 5. And so, at BYU Hawaii, at the time, some of you may know him, Uncle Bill Wallace, who has passed away, was the director. And he gave permission for the 5 families to have academic instruction and academic space to teach them while this dialogue was going on until the decision was made. I volunteered to be their teacher. We had 7 courses every day. We had other people to cover the other courses, free of cost to the students. We had an English professor who taught the English. We had math, a math person who taught the math. We had a PE person at the university volunteer to help with the cause. We were well into the first trimester at the time, and our students had classes every day. At the end of the trimester, the department realized that if it doesn't look good for the department, that all of this is happening free of cost to the students. We didn't have curriculum, we didn't have a teacher, we had no money. So we got a phone call that said, oh, we have room at Kaho'ohalahala High Intermediate. Please come. And we did. And so, to answer your question, if you listen to your own, that part of us that never lies to us, listen the first time, it will give you the answer. These parents received letters that they were possibly in violation with truancy, that their students would not graduate, that all kinds of things. But they listened to their number. We all listen to our number. And we tried our best to do what he told us. Those 5 students paved the way at Kaho'ohalahala High Intermediate for the rest of the students to come. This school year we will be graduating on 6 graduating class. To illustrate that, the minimum requirement is to listen to your mom. And if this is the right time, if the mother is porno, then it's porno. And that's the beauty of immersion, is that we're able to teach that concept of na'au and ALOHA and Kula, because that's the language we speak. And those Kula who are no longer with us, or with us, they always are with us. They always with us. So my mahalo, Kaho'ohalahala Kana'o, Meka Ukila.
Mine was a short, simple answer, but as Kaho'ohalahala reminded, it's not as simple. You know, there really isn't a minimum. But the more you have there, the larger your group, the more power, the more it's more encouraging to open the program.
Aloha kakou. I just want to share that my heart is so happy today to see all these people in the Lanai community. Because some of you may not know me, but I taught school here for 23 years, and some of you were my former students, and now you're parents of children that are in Kula Kaiapuni, or you would like them to be in Kula Kaiapuni. This is something we've talked about since 1974, and so my heart is really, really happy that you're all here today, and it's going to happen. I just want to add a little bit. Our story in Lahaina wasn't quite as successful. Our students, after they finished 5th grade, they had to get on a bus, and they go an hour a day to go to Kalama, and then they go an hour a day one way to go up to Kauna'oa High School, where they had to continue their immersion experience. That's why I'm very adamant next year. I have my 6th graders this year. Next year, we'll bring it all back to West Maui, and our students will be able to go all the way to I want to answer Kalea's question. My challenge to you, you have an ideal situation here on the Nike because your students don't have to go anywhere. You have a K-12 school. And so you can grow the program year to year to year. And I'm sure when you start the program here, you will have a lot of students that want to come. The challenge is the sustainability of the program. And how do you sustain the program year after year after year? And make sure you have that foundation every year coming in as your students move up the grade. And so as you consider what model you want for Kula Kaiapuni for Lanai, please think of those issues too. The program will start off with a bang. It's something that this community has wanted for a very, very long time. And you will have the numbers come at the beginning. But how do you sustain those numbers year after year? I know a lot of babies are born on this island, so that's one way. But as you consider how you start and where you start and where you want to go, please keep that as part of your vision.
Any more questions?
Where would the teachers come from? Does the DOE help with the teachers, or do they have to come from the area?
So the question is, where do the teachers come from? Will the DOE find the teachers for you? Or do they have to come from the area? Those kinds of things. I think I'm going to send it back to Lynn.
Okay, right now to start your program off, I know that right now I have 4 teachers at our school, and we go kindergarten, junior kindergarten, up through grade 6. And 2 of my teachers are Lanai girls. And I love them to death. They have helped me build my program. I've only been at Princess Nahienaena Elementary School for 3 years. We've gone from 2 teachers to 4 within that 3-year time. That's how much we're growing. And I know that it's just part of their life journey, and the reason they went into immersion education, and I believe it in my heart, so they can come back to their community and teach over here. I know that's what Makua wants for them. And I will send them to you with my blessings. But I have to tell you that you have to be pono. You have to be set. Because the Kumu do not run your program. No program can be run without the Makua. Your time is right, as was shared with you earlier. Our time is right, and in reality, your school will be like Princess Nahienaena, where you will have a Kula Kaiapuni program within your English program. I have 800 students at my school. 65 of those are in the Kula Kaiapuni program. And so resources will be limited. But your time is right. You have a new principal who supports you. We both share the same complex areas superintendent, and he is very, very supportive of the Kaiapuni program. We have one in the, we have a program in Lahaina. Mohope'i has a program now. Lanai will have a program. Our only other area is Kana, and we hope someday they'll have a program as well. But when the time is right, and it's not going to be next year because I talked to my Kumus, they will come to you. But to answer your big question, the Kumus come out of University of Hawaii at Manoa, University of Hawaii at Hilo. 2 of my Kumus are from the Manoa program, 2 of them are from the Hilo program. Please, please encourage anybody that's going to college to be a Hawaiian immersion teacher. We need them. They're just starting up to go around.
Now, can you share some of the Anuenue stuff? Are you teachers?
Because most of our teachers are young, when Anuenue started in the beginning, it's about the same time that the charter school movement started. And the charter school people from Lana'i High and from Waialae came to our school and said, you folks are primed to be a charter school. And when we looked at what charter schools look like, it was very tempting and very inviting. But there is one very important factor that we took into consideration, is that at a charter school, teachers cannot earn their probation and tenure. And so because our teachers wanted their tenure, we declined the offer to be a charter school. And so our teachers can earn their tenure at our program. There's so many things about teachers that are very, very important because they're young, they get married, they move away, they're young, they go home, many of them went back to Maui and other places. But again, when that challenge comes up, there's a way to work through it. And as was told here, listen to Makua, listen to the Na'au, and listen to your heart, and listen to your children. That's good for your children.
Okay, well, I think as far as teachers are concerned too, part of the answer is, and I want to point back to the issue of sustainability, because I think as teachers get older, or visions and life's dreams get older, there's going to be teacher loss, teacher turnover here too. So I want to stress that the recruitment process is starting already. Interest is building with the Kiki over here already. And I think part of the Lanai's quest is going to be to make sure that it's a program of pride, a program that inspires children to want to be a part of it. And not just as students, but later on as a lifestyle of choice. And I think that's the, as far as teacher preparation is concerned, making Kaiapuni and making ALOHA a lifestyle change is the most important part. And I think that's what's going to need to take place here on that as time goes on. So you can build teachers.
Any more questions?
We were talking about the expansion of this program into the school. How do we integrate the non-immersion part of our school so that there's the buy-in is greater, we have a greater interest, so we do expand this more? How is that going to work?
Okay, so the question is, should immersion education take place here at Lana'i High Elementary? What kind of considerations need to be made in order to expand that and to ensure that there's a relationship between the non-immersion and the immersion?
That and like if there is interest from Kumus that want to learn Hawaii, and so that they can integrate that into their classes as well, it would be way great. So yeah, trying to bring it up, and I'm in the ALOHA cohort, by the way, so I work with Kula and
And in order to, and also to ensure that Hawaiian language can be made available to everybody on campus. Okay, I'm going to pass this over to Kahele Duko, who is a parent at Paia Elementary, and some of you might have heard some of the things that have been taking place at Paia during the expansion. They are currently 2/3 of the total school population, where most of our schools are the schools within a school are the small population. At Paia, they've grown to be the majority at that school. So I'll have Kahele share a little bit about the context.
Let's see. So I guess I'll start with, so like the current state of most immersion schools that are schools within schools like yours will be, is sort of trying to bounce back from, the last 12 or so years of No Child Left Behind, which has basically mandated that immersion schools very closely align to their English counterparts. So we're sort of in a place now where we're trying to figure out how to get back to what we shared with you in the presentation. How can we continue to be a Kaiapuni school within an English school, yet maintain positive relationships with other schools? So my first year of teaching was at Paia School, quite a long time ago. And because school is the only place that our students would learn Hawaiian, we were sort of insulated as students, our students. However, as faculty, that was very different. And I think if I had to do it again, I would definitely encourage more collaboration with our English counterparts, but in a different context. So the collaboration mostly that exists now would be how can immersion align to English standards? That's pretty much where it is now. And what I would encourage you guys to do would be how can Kaiapuni learning enrich English classrooms? Because even at Paia, I think it would be more advantageous. So at Paia, they do have recess and lunch and other things together, but that's all in English. And as parents, we're trying to push to say, it's okay if we have all those things together, but let's do it in Hawaiian. All our kids speak English. So they're not really gaining anything from that experience, but your kids don't speak Hawaiian. So if they were exposed to Hawaiian language content, that would help our children, but it would also help your children learn some Hawaiian. So I think sort of maybe flipping the paradigm on how collaboration works between the different programs. And let me say too that I also taught at Waiau with Kaho'ohalahala, and there were 4 programs on that campus at one time. And I think there was great collaboration. It was about appreciating the diversity on campus and not, you know what I mean? There was a traditional, right? There was a traditional program, there was a tech program, there was a Hawaiian program, right? And everybody sort of appreciated the goals of each program and also shared between each other when they needed to. I think that's the key. It's not about you gotta be like me or I gotta be like you, but how can we enrich the education for both parts? So I guess that comes from respecting and valuing each other.
First, she's pointing at me to talk about Lana'i Elementary School as well. What I wanted to point at first, when you start to integrate and think about ways to collaborate amongst schools within schools or 2 schools that are running parallel at the same time, I'd like to bring up something that many people sometimes have a hard time understanding. The development of the English language strength is determined strongly on the strength of development of Hawaiian language. So, and I bring that up only because for faculty, I think she's pointing at, as faculty collaborate, that's the perfect environment for that collaboration. There are going to come specific times where the children come together, but I think in the first, the infancy stage of the development of this school is going to have to be, somewhat isolated, where the children's Hawaiian language development, the acquisition of language is going to have to be strong, real strong. And so I think as far as the educational best practice of collaboration right now, and maybe at a faculty level or maybe some group interactions, but the more and more we see English creep into the classroom, the less and less strong the development and acquisition of Hawaiian language becomes. Thus, to me, the English development at that later level that Kumu was talking about, both languages are affected by that grouping together or by that language collaboration. So sometimes it's better off in the beginning to isolate the language learning environment, like some of the programs I have seen, just for the children's sake, for education's sake.
I just wanted to share a little bit about what's happening in Lana'i Elementary. I think, and I want to be able to point to the idea of leadership and what happens on a school campus. It really is about school leadership. The person that's making those decisions creates an environment that has positive relationships across the school. And in the case of Lana'i, the principal that's there now has encouraged her teachers to open up classes for the English teachers in order to provide Hawaiian language context more broadly across the school. I don't think that we're going to be hearing those teachers on the English side being completely fluent in Hawaiian and allowing, having our the immersion students cross over to those classrooms. But in terms of the message that it's sending from school leadership, Hawaiian language is valued on that campus, which is an English and a Hawaiian language campus. So I think the school leadership is going to be very important in establishing that kind of positive relationships for Hawaiian language to exist on the school campus.
I agree with Holly's. Leadership is very important. And as your school program develops here, one thing we do at our school, because I think my focus is on all the students at our school. One thing, and I think for them to learn the language is very important. All students, even the English students. So what we do every morning at our school is the entire student body gets together, English, and it's Hawaiian Immersion takes the lead, but it's getting stronger and stronger on the English side. We all OLE together. Every single morning, the bell rings, the students don't go to their classroom, they come out, and we all have a place where we gather, and we all OLE. How many? 3 OLEs every morning, thereabouts. And when we first started, Hawaiian Immersion was loud and strong, and now as I stand up there and the administration comes out, all the teachers, all the students, the English is getting stronger and stronger. And sometimes I hear those little English students, they know the oldies are ready and they can do that. So you can, whatever your school decides on, those are some of the cultural practices and the language practices that you can bring to your whole school. We also have Hawaiian language classes every week that's open to the community, but open to the parents, open to the Kumu. Some of the teachers on the English side, they come. So we have 2 classes, one for beginners at night and one for intermediate students at night. And it's open to everybody in the community. So you can pick what part of the culture. I think at our school too, we have the Hawaiian Studies program. And so a lot of Hawaiian language, mainly through song, because children pick up singing and language through song really, really fast than they do with formalized instruction. So some of those ideas can be incorporated for the whole entire school, whether they're part of Kula faculty or not.
Just real quick in terms of collaboration, I was thinking about when you asked the question. I think one thing that is true that was said is that the administration will definitely play a major role in helping the faculty and staff create that environment, that collaborative environment. But if you have a Kaiapuni on this campus, if you have a Papahana Kaiapuni on this campus, the program goal, part of the program goal is getting those kids to be able to speak. So it's also educating your whole school community about what you're doing. And that sharing of information, it helps to create understanding. So it's not mistaken as, oh, those guys, they shut themselves out with us and them separate. You have to understand that it's one school working together. It's still Lana'i school. It's Lana'i school. It's all your school community. But the decision as a community that whatever you guys decide to do, if it is to have a Kaiapuni, that the community becomes informed of what that means. Now that doesn't mean that it's separate. You guys, us guys, can't be that way. For some parts of the program, it's necessary. But once those kids, and my feeling in having conversations with some people is, you guys aren't going to start off with a kindergarten class. When you guys start, you're going to have a mixed group of children. And those kids, like the diagram Mr. Naumu drew for you guys, those kids are going to have to start English right away. So they'll have instruction in Hawaiian, but also instruction in English. And the teachers who are getting the program off the ground, they're going to be drowning. So collaboration with their English counterparts to me, I think, is a very good point where the guys running the Kaiapuni program and the guys who are on the English side can work together to figure out how they're going to address English language learning and make it specific. Because if you're English language learning, if you take English language for Kaiapuni students and just say, oh no, we're going to do it just regular English instruction, you're not going to see them succeed in the same way that those regular English students will. But if the conversations are being had prior to them, going into the English classroom, the English teachers can better build what those students need when they get there. And I think that's where great collaboration can occur.
I kakou everything they say because that is in my different. I was on Hawaii for a long time, with the immersion program, and all of us have similar successes and similar struggles in how we establish our schools. Somewhat like what we're doing right now, getting clarification, understanding. I heard buy-in and so forth. Buy-in comes in by Bombay because when they see, like what Papa was saying, when they see the results. But for me also, once you folks are sure what you want to do here, that collaboration gets built into your school plan. The state office can provide guidance, but we don't write individual plans because we're not prescriptive. It should be community building the program. And if it's in your plan, in your school plan, Kaiapuni is a viable academic system or program in your school, and the way that your team pulls it together is that it is a collaborative. We are one, we are working to support one another. I think that's also important to make sure that it's in your school.
Real quick, I got another one. Maybe professional development, because that's something that as I was teaching at Waiau, it didn't seem that there were too many cultural or Hawaiian language-based rooted professional development opportunities for us. And as we got them, we enjoyed having those opportunities, but maybe that's something for the principal to go out and search. You talked about the internet voice navigation part. That could be something that the whole school enjoys. And it's looking at opportunity for professional development like that can cross into cultural learning, language learning, and on the English side as well.
Yeah, I think Lana'i is ahead of the game in terms of what you guys can be teaching as the foundation for, creating critical thinkers and that kind of thing, because you guys got some deep history, super deep, important Hawaiian history and that kind of stuff, which is like, you guys got this good stuff going on that you should capitalize on. Question?
It was brought up earlier about the importance of the parents' involvement. Could you share, just so that the families also know, what are some of the things that are actually going to be required? We want, yeah, but what are the requirements that are going to, because the program will only succeed if the children can also go home, right, and talk. And so what are the things that the families need to be prepared for?
So the question is, and I think it's going to address one of the expectations that you all stated earlier about parents' commitment. What is it going to take in terms of a parent's role, or somebody on that side, I think it was. And then why don't I just go ahead and throw in the community piece as well? What can the community do? What does the community need to do? What do the parents need to do to help support this movement, should you guys decide to move in this direction? I'm just going to pass it right around the table.
Okay, let me just point this out. As a public school, nothing can be mandated. So those of you who may have had experience with AHA Punanaleo or Punanaleo school, they actually mandate that you have to put in so many hours scrubbing the toilets and cleaning the floors and so forth. At the Kaiapuni, that cannot be done. So it's all voluntary, but we hope that you will want to be involved to the extent that you can be involved. And there are hundreds of ways that you can be involved as a parent. One important way is doing all that you can is to learn Kaho'ohalahala yourself and encouraging that at home outside of the classroom. So you can imagine if you value that as a parent, as a father, you send your child off to school and then they come home and, Papa, and you just watch your child keep playing and say, oh, I remember, I think it was maybe a relative of my cousin or something. We went to, I took them with me to, I think it was a Punanaleo, and the kids came running up and were speaking Hawaiian, and one of them turned to this other person that was with me that didn't speak Hawaiian and was just going on, and then stopped and said, I don't know what you're saying, but they're so disappointed. They had something to share with them, but they realized, I cannot tell you because you don't understand Hawaiian. But that's the only point I want to make is that it is voluntary, and I know that as parents you want the very best for your children. And what we've seen across the state over the past 27 years is that our parents are way more involved than regular parents in their students' education. Because more is required. There's always things you can go in, talk to your Kumu and say, Kumu, what can I do? Do you need me to do papers or put things up on the wall? Anything that you can do to help that Kumu? Because your Kumu is going to be working a lot harder than any other Kumu in English. Because they're going to be working on the curriculum after school for tomorrow, that kind of thing. And getting as involved as you can. And not just parents, but the community as well. There are going to be opportunities for the whole community to participate in fundraisers and so forth, and that extended ohana and community is going to be very, very important as well.
I have taught at Waiau. When there was a Malama Kupona, we all lifted and started Anuenue. I taught at Anuenue for a little while, and there was another Malama Kupona. Went to Haumana and started Haumana, and now I'm in Kaho'ohalahala, haven't started that. But I'm going to speak to you as a Makua. There's two kuleana, basically, that you need to be aware of if you're not already aware of it. One is the spiritual kuleana, and the other is the temple. The spiritual kuleana is that everybody, individually and collectively as a ohana, asks each other, ask the divine power that guides us. And I'm talking spirituality, I'm not talking any individual religion or church, because we are spiritual as a people. Even now to this generation, back to our first kupuna on these islands, we have that connection with Kealoha. That spiritual kuleana has to be taken care of first. I have learned this in our journey. I was taught this as a child. That when you open the way spiritually first, everything else will open before you. All the answers that you need will come to you, will be shown to you, or you will be put in a place where you will hear the answer that you need. That spiritual kuleana, there's never an end to that. It's carried. And let me say in general, Kuleana, we are all born with Kuleana. We are blessed with families that walk with us and teach us until we can recognize what our Kuleana is. And then we pick it up and we walk. And they walk with us until they cannot walk anymore and they have to go onto their own journey. And we do the same for our children. That spiritual Kuleana, you may not do by yourself. It requires each one of us to look deep down inside and ask, is this the one? Is this what is pono for my family? Because us as Kumu, we're going to support whatever you feel is pono for your family. The temple side, the answers will come. You will also find Kumu right here on the map. I went to school. I graduated with a teaching degree. But for the first 10 years of our married life, I stayed home with our people because that's where we felt that we belonged. There came a time at Waiau when they needed a teacher. There was no teacher available. We searched, couldn't find it. Well, they scraped the bottom of the barrel and I threw my hat in the ring and I jumped into the fire and taught in Immersion. There are teachers among you. And when you hear that, even my Makua, because he will help you. That divine source that is not recorded so many times is the one that guides this program. Despite all adversity and challenges that this program has met from its beginning and until now, we have not gone away. We have not been erased. And we continue to help the families who feel that this is what they want for their kids. There will be times when everybody will be happy, and we are all going to be, I hope we don't do cutting and pasting anymore, but sometimes you're going to have to cut and paste Hawaiian translations into English printed books because we don't have a printer that prints in Hawaiian too much. We have a few that's out there now, much better than what we did before. But you will be required to do those things on your own, voluntarily, for our people. We are now Kupuna, and we're still doing those things, but that's okay. That's my plight. Finding your Kumu, you have a good start. And you will find the Kumu that you need. That spiritual way, that opening of the spiritual way, you will walk. The Kupuna will always walk with you. Trust that. Trust your instincts. Trust what your mouth tells you. I know for us, the question within our own families has been, well, what about the English? How are your children? This is when my 32-year-old was 6 years old. What about the English? How are they going to survive in this world? What are you going to do? And our answer was simple. We are going to support them in this program. We're going to feed their interests. Because our kupuna did, and they're not confused. And we have a lot of students who have gone on to higher education and who have done what basically they wanted to do. We never told our children what they should become. We hope they would have an interest in Hawaiian, something or other, but we never told them to do that. On their own, they began to see. Because children, they don't see that when you tell them the first time. They look at you like, I like going with my friends, or I like watch TV, or I like do this, I like do that. But after time, when they become young adults, when they become Makua themselves, they will be thankful to you for the choices you made. Back then, they never had a choice. You are waking up at 5 o'clock, and we're jumping on that van, and we're driving an hour and a half, and you go to school, and we're coming home, and we'll start this all over again. Would I do it again? Yes. I'm so excited that this community is thinking in that direction. I live on the other island, but you know our ALOHA unit is strong. I don't know anyone in particular, but I know you Ohana. And I know that we go back to the same Puna. This is an opportunity for you and your kids, because we really are Kupuna, yeah, all of us in the making. Our decisions right here, right now, should be for 7 generations after us when we're not here. What we do now will help them up ahead, because that's what they leave behind us. They left us all those things. Anyway, Kalama, Tupula, Video, Honey, and all the other stuff that will fall in place after you get that done.
My journey with Kula Kaiapuni started with Punanaleo Maui, and I'd like to give recognition to Keoni. For you and allowing us a very long time ago to be a part of Punanaleo Maui and the Kumu. That was my daughter's Kumu way back in Punanaleo Maui. I probably wouldn't still be on this journey today, but please stand up and be recognized, Keoni. Yes, he was Kaiolu's Kumu at one time. And I would also like to recognize my friend Malia, who now is moved to Lanai because her daughter and my daughter started our journey with Hawaiian Immersion together. Malia, mahalo. No matter where we go, she's still my friend, and we have that connection that you were just talking about. Let's see, I'm going to take it from a different perspective to try to answer your question. We started our journey probably patterned after Paia a little bit because we were the new kids on the block when we started in Nahienaena, the Kaiapuni program. What we did is my daughter was in the lead class. And again, there were 5 of them in that lead class, and it was a K1 combination when we started. But we also started Punanaleo in Lahaina, which unfortunately is not there. If I had any kind of recommendation for this community, and I'm also looking at it for our community in Lahaina, is to establish a preschool. Because that is the foundation upon which your Hawaiian language immersion program will be built. It's very difficult for the Makua in West Maui, because it's their kuleana to go and recruit every year and bring in the families. The Kumus can't do it, I can't do it. I don't know what your principal is going to decide. My goal every year is that we will bring in the same amount of students into kindergarten that the English will bring into kindergarten. And so God bless my Makua, because for the last several years, they've been able to bring in 23, 24 new families every single year. And that is why now we can sustain the program up through high school, which has been our vision since we started. And you can ask my Kumu, I cried, because I never thought that I would still be a part of that vision after my daughter and my 2 oldest granddaughters went through the Kula program at Princess Nahienaena. I never thought I would come back and be the administrator of that program. But it's amazing how things circle around and you're put in the right place at the right time. But anyway, what we did in Lahaina is we established our own parents group. Okay, we incorporated ourselves, it became 501c3. I know Punanaleo has their parent group, Paia has their parent group. The program cannot run without the Makua. It just cannot. I mean, there's going to come a time in your lives when you're not going to be able to help your children with their homework anymore because you don't understand the language to that particular point. But that's where the Kumu come in, and that's where they help. But you have to be the foundation of the program. You have to be the support of the program. You build your community. People can still be the part of that particular parents group because it's the resources from your community that are going to sustain your program as well. We're lucky in Lahaina, we have the old Lahaina Luau, for example. Every year they host the Makihiki celebration for all of our Kaipuni students on Maui, from high school all the way down to Punanalea. And so don't leave anybody out. When you're planning it, your strength is in your Makua group. And what happens is that Makua group recruits more Makua and more Makua, because you'll start out strong at first, but again, the challenge is how do you sustain the program? How do you grow it? And if you don't have the support of the Makua, it's going to be tough, because the Kumu don't run the program, the principal doesn't run the program, we support it. You know, the Kumu's job is to teach the keiki, teach the haumana. And as one person said over here, they're going to be swamped. I have 4 Kumu, one teaches kindergarten, one teaches first grade, then the rest of the grades are combination classes. The English side of my school does not have any combination classes. The Kumus they have to be part, because they're part of DOE, they're accountable to the English standards, but they're also teaching the Hawaiian standards. And then to teach that to multiple grades, it's tough. It's really tough. But with Makua support, it can be done, and they can support the school. Our Makua plan things like the Ohana days, where outside of school, everybody, it's a time for the Makua to come together, the Kumu come, the haumana come, the principal comes, whatever administration, and we go out and we do something. We work in the taro patches in the valley, or we just have a fun day down at the beach all together, celebrating each other. About once a month or once a quarter, we do something that's ALOHA. We don't exclude anybody, but it's primarily for the Hawaiian immersion families. Sometimes we even come to Lana'i for our PD, you know, that kind of thing. So if you can incorporate yourself as a Makua group, you'll be there. A lot of times the school, people want to give money to the Hawaiian immersion program. The schools, because we're part of the state of Hawaii and all the rigmarole and laws that go along with that, we can't always accept money, but your Makua group could. A lot of things, as this Makua was saying, we need books, we need curriculum, we need supplies, and Makua sometimes will help us go fundraise, and then with those funds we're able to buy computer programs or whatever it is that would help support our Kumus and their delivery of education for our haumana. So I just want to say too that I'm right across the way on a boat ride. Anytime you want to come visit our program at our school, you're more than welcome to. Any support or help you need, please just give me a phone call. I can share what we did, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's what you have to do on the end.
Kumu, you mentioned that you had a hard time following Kaho'ohalahala. I have a hard time following you. I'll try to keep my remarks, keep it short and simple, please. I think your actions as Makua speak for themselves. This has been a long meeting. This has been the weekend. This has been during the holidays. You could have been someplace else, but you chose to be here. And I think actions speak louder than words. Makua and Anuenue have helped the school. A simple case in point, talking about enrollment. This year we had 60 kindergartners. So we had to move the weight room out of A building. And talking about weight room, I wore this jacket, ADCOM, Athletic Directors Coaches Association jacket, where perhaps you as Makua can help a lot in the core or extracurricular area, in helping your students grow in all ways, athletically, musically, Kula, and all the other ways. A case in point, I hope you folks on Lanai have your 8-man football team to go play hana and Molokai and St. Anthony and Seaberry. So I wish you folks well in that area also. It's all exciting. The whole thing comes together.
So I guess you should envision this as not putting your child into immersion, but putting your whole family into immersion, because that's really what it's about. It's about transforming families. So for myself, I'm not the typical parent. We have 2 parents who speak Hawaiian, but I have 6 siblings who don't speak Hawaiian, and all of their children are in immersion. So what immersion has really done is, create that generation. All of them speak Hawaiian. And it's not without challenge, because I get texts at all hours of the day and night. What is this saying? How do you do this? What is this ha'avina? But what parents do is they create networks, right? So they create networks where people are, blogging and texting and helping each other, at the grade level, to help each other do their homework. So it is about transforming your whole family, right? And again, your kids are going to learn Hawaiian like this. I went to my friend's house the other night for a party, and I walked around her house and everything was labeled, because her child is in 2nd grade. And he can speak Hawaiian, 1st grade. He can speak Hawaiian. His parents are still sort of trying to get along, but they're trying. That's the point. It's a continual process of learning. And I think what keeps, I know my siblings going is partly me saying, hello, you're keeping your kids in immersion. The other part, right, is seeing that next generation where, when we have family parties, they can all speak Hawaiian. And if one child didn't, they would be left out. So the other day I'm taking 7 kids in my van to the movies, and usually it's me and together I say, Ola Hawaii, Ola, reminding them to speak Hawaiian. And it wasn't me, it was Nahale, and you would never do it. My 3rd grader going, Ola Hawaii, okay. What that meant to me was that they're realizing the value themselves. It's not just mom and dad and auntie telling them that they should be speaking Hawaiian, but they're realizing themselves saying, hey, we can all speak Hawaiian, we should be speaking Hawaiian everywhere. But it is about transforming, families and communities, and that's exciting to me.
Okay, I'm going to try to be real brief. Kahele took my line about you enrolling your family into a program. So now I'm just trying to think of what I'm going to say. So actually, I'm going to be real brief to answer your question about what Makua can do. And I think I'll just sum it up by saying, 1, few, and then many. So 1, as a Makua, I'm going to tell my kids to eat vegetables, and then I'm going to make apples. I'm not going to tell my kids to read, but I don't read. So as a Makua, the best thing you can do is live the example that you want your children to follow. If you want them to speak Hawaiian, you let them see that Hawaiian is important. If you want them to Hawaiian things, like if you want them to learn how make that a part of your holiday. Make it a part of your regular life. If your kids see that it's a regular part of your ohana, you're growing up, they're growing up, then it's not going to be something that they have to bring back into their family for their children. So that's 1. A few, when you come to Kaiapuni, the majority of parents will be in the English medium side. So the few parents we have to rely on, like I said, make a network of those parents. There's this thing about race to the top, and in our assessment piece we wrote about that. We don't have to race to the top. We can all help each other get there together. And as parents, that's one thing that, especially as the homework gets harder, you guys are going to have to rely on each other to help each other figure out where to help each other help your children. And the Kumus can play a big role in that. Now the many, those few parents that you have that make your Kaiapuni program stronger, you can help educate the many parents that are part of your whole school community. And by doing that, bring better understanding and collaboration amongst your whole community, which, Lanai is a very captive audience. You guys are small and nowhere to go. You guys have the perfect environment to do this. So 1, few, and many. That's what parents do.
Because the team really taking I'm a good start. I think for me, it's gonna be about belief. Make sure you never stop believing. Don't question teachers. Don't ever ask your kids, oh, you don't know that in English. Oh, you don't know what that word means. Because it's small stuff like that that's gonna just, deconstruct everything that this style of education is trying to build. I think for emotionally, the impact of those kind of questions and kind of life for everybody, if you like the kids sit up here in Hawaiian, but just relegating Hawaiian to, oh boy, go sit up here, go sit up here. And I've seen it done. What that does is it tells the student that I cannot, nobody else can. Like go monkey dance. And we're not making the kids for little dancing monkeys. This is again a reshaping of reality, a reshaping of Hawaiian society to actually walk and live in a bicultural, by-understanding world. That's what makes Hawaii different. That's what makes Hawaii Hawaii. That's what makes Hawaii the number one tourist attraction of people around the world. And without it, we disappear. That's the part. So make sure that the emotional connection to the language and the culture and the education is there. Because for every question we can say, oh, you don't know that. While English-speaking parents are asking the kids, oh, you know what that word means. You know how many thousands of kids know that you don't know because we never go learn Hawaiian. And that to me is the most important thing that I tell my whole family, I tell my cousins, I say, I ever ask them every question, oh, you don't know that, because think of all the things you don't know that they know. And that's the main thing to understand.
I also agree because a lot of us share the same history in Immersion. And I also had 2 kids that went to the program and eventually got into private school. But I think to answer that question, you have to be really sure. There's 2 words, commitment and advocacy. As a parent, you're gonna do everything that you want, that you have to do to make sure that your student, that your child is becoming successful. And all the things that they share. I mean, for years before I became an Immersion, before there was an Immersion program, I taught in the DVE English program. A lot of our teachers were there already and still are doing. But once I became an Immersion teacher, I realized, and in fact, I at first didn't want to because they'd say, oh, they're coming up the class, you want to be the teacher. I knew how much was expected of a teacher. But expectation for the parent is that commitment. And when you come into the program, you gotta be very, very clear of what you're committing to. And it's kind of related to what Kale is saying. Because after a while, some parents are comparing English to something that, compare the program to the English program, which cannot be done. So make sure that you're committed to the program. You're gonna be doing all kind of things. You heard all the examples, from fundraising. For me, the advocacy part is when I became a middle school teacher, or I opened up the Kapa'a middle school program. It was really hard. My principal wanted me, the secondary is a whole different puppy up there. You have different content areas you have to teach. Math to 6th grade, math to 7th grade, math to 8th grade, science, it goes on and on in the secondary part. And my principal wanted me to teach 40 kids, grades 6 to 8, by myself, all the content areas and all the subject areas. But you know who came? Parents have so much power for the parents. As soon as me and my wife, a lot of times our partners are just as strong, our greatest support group. But when the parents spoke and we called them out, they all came in mass, went to the district building, went into our district superintendent and said, how can you do that? The numbers don't match. When their voice was heard, I have position to meet the principal's half position for another position. So for me, I'm a parent, but I know the parents are so important. And commitment is important. And without the parents, like Lynn said, it would not be sustainable. So.
I'd like to ask Kili Namomo to come up. Kili is the director of the Punangaleo Maui, and I'm hoping that she can offer some insight kamali'i level can provide in terms of parent roles?
Mahalo. Aloha. I'm Kilina Mau. I'm the director of Punanaleo Maui. It's the only Punanaleo on the island of Maui at this time. And I just want to mahalo all of these guys here because what they share with you is a lot of knowledge, a lot of commitment, a lot of heartache that we've all endured, myself included, for the last 20 plus years. Some of them have been here for nearly 30 years. And I share the same stories that they have as well. The Makua question is really key. I can't tell you how important that is. Without Makua, this thing is not going to happen at all. And I can tell you that because I've been the director of a very thriving and successful punanaleo. Of all the punanaleos, there's 11 of them throughout the state. And I think our school, our particular school, is wonderful. And it's wonderful because we have a dynamic staff and we have wonderful parents, and there's a couple of them here also in the room today. We could not do what we do on Maui without the parents being involved at the level that they are involved in and how committed they are to the program. In addition to that, the ALOHA Punanaleo also offers the types of resources to support these families. And if it's done well enough, you can really create magic. And I've never thought of Punanaleo as, by the way, if you don't know, Punanaleo is a school for preschoolers for 3 to 5 years of age. So this ALOHA Punanaleo and Punanaleo program is for your children before you even get to these guys over here and everything that was shared with you. If you are interested in having a Punanaleo, I did speak with the ALOHA Punanaleo because when I got this invitation from a parent a few weeks ago, I wanted to know what their commitment was behind all of you. And I'm happy to say that they would be willing to very possibly open a Punanaleo here if the commitment and the interest is here for the community. That's what they want to see, is to see that there's commitment and an interest from the community to have a Punanaleo started. And this is my truth, and from what I have witnessed over the many years that I've been involved with Punanaleo is not for the keiki. Punanaleo is not for the keiki. The keiki will learn Olelo Hawaii in 3 months, and they're gonna fly with that, and they're gonna learn so many good things that they need to learn in their early education. Punanaleo is for families. Punanaleo is for families. And if you want a really great training ground for knowing what to do, for your ohana, for how you're going to be successful in creating a Kaiapuni here on Lanai, you can do that through a Punanaleo, an established Punanaleo on this island. So if you want to have a Punanaleo here, it can happen, and through that process, you can train your parents. Because as was stated, you can't be mandated to do what needs to be done to support your school. It's the hope that you're going to get that training through Punanaleo, through an organization like Punanaleo, whether it be Punanaleo or something else. It's the Makua and it's the training that you and the support that you give one another that's going to sustain your school and commitment through this entire process, through Kaiapuni. And we have, our Maui group, thankfully, have been hosted twice here on this wonderful island. And we've come here last year in 2012 and in 2013. We collectively got 100 people to come here and camp down on your wonderful shoreline. Thank you for sharing. And so we love this island. We are committed to this island, and I know that if there's anything that we can do to support you and to help you guys get established or do whatever it takes, we are here to help you as well. So we're sticking around if you need to ask questions. We're here for you.
I want to make sure that we get to the things that are left on the expectations today. So I kind of wrote some stuff on my finger, on my hand. So there was still the parent and community growth issue that was there, and I think we just gone through that. The other issue was the model. What kinds of recommendations can this panel make in terms of a good model for Lanai? In the Department of Education, there are different ways in which the schools exist. So there's school within a school model, which means that there would be Kaiapuni classrooms alongside English classrooms. And then there's also fully self-contained schools where it's all immersion for the entire campus. So it's kind of like deciding what you guys want to say. I would imagine that you guys have to do a school within a school model, but I don't know, maybe you might have another place where you might want to do a fully self-contained school, I'm not sure. But I think perhaps I'm going to pass this mic really quickly and repeat around starting from that side, so that Kale feels like you can get the important stuff too. And just have to share the ideas about where you guys should go in terms of grade level. Should you go K-12 one time? Should you go K-6? Should you go K-2? Those kinds of ideas, and they're thinking behind that. Okay?
It's the same as Kaui, so it comes down to what your decision is.
I think it's going to be up to the parents and what the student needs are. I think for me, there are other questions too, is how do you include English at what grade level? Sorry, that's part of the model. And for me, I would hope, we can talk later outside if anybody has questions, but I'm also going to point back to the stronger the Hawaiian language, the stronger they acquire Hawaiian language and begin instruction, the stronger their English development will be. So I'm a proponent of actually pushing the inclusion of English back into intermediate, possibly even high school, so that Hawaiian language development can take place at a very strong and rooted core within the child. But as far as the model, that's what I like to say.
What model should you follow? I think just from the conversations that I've heard, you guys are already having discussions about what that first group of students may look like. It doesn't look like it's going to be one grade, like you're starting with one grade. It looks like it's going to be multiple grade levels, possibly at one time. And you're going to have, from Maui, you're going to have those two teachers possibly come here. So 2 teachers at multiple grade levels. That's going to be like school within a school where each teacher will have multiple times and multiple grade levels in one classroom working together. Again, how the models kind of develop. So fully self-contained and school within a school. Those are 2 different types of models. But school within a school, every school within a school, every Kaipuni school within a school looks different. And it's shaped by the willingness of the community, the faculty and the admin to work together to make it work out the best that it can for that kind of. So what Lanai's school within a school is going to look like is going to be decided by you, the community, the admin and faculty working together, and you guys coming to some kind of common ground to best service those people. That's what the model is.
A general comment is, what is in the best interest of the student? Putting a student in an immersion classroom sometimes can be not in that student's best interest. So immersion is not for everybody, but it's open to everybody. But what is in the best interest of your child or your mokopuna is the key you're in.
I think it's up to your community how you would want to establish your Kaiapuni program here. It is up to the community what you want, but the reality is what resources do you have available. And you need to work very closely with your administration because not all wishes can be granted at the same time. My recommendation is to build your foundation. Make your foundation strong and build from there. At Princess Nahienaena Elementary School, we started with a K1 and we added another grade level every year after that. But that doesn't mean that that's what you have to do here on Lanai. But again, I really recommend that you build your foundation.
Zero. Whatever it is that you decide. best for the population of students that you have, which are your kids. And then your decision will be based on that and the resources. I know through experience, when we started Kula, we were a school within a school, and schools have limited resources, and now they have to cut the same pie with you there. So there has to be dialogue with your administrator. I totally wholeheartedly support as much Hawaiian as you can put in that classroom is the best way to go. If you can do 100%, fabulous. Total immersion, fabulous.
Okay, I just want to say that you folks seem to be in a very good position. When my wife and I helped to open Hawaiian Elementary School, we were not in as good a position as you guys are in. We were told several months before school started that Kaho'ohalahala Elementary School, the principal committed to us that he would pick up the program. What he forgot was that he couldn't make that decision without the SCBM, which we no longer have. The SCBM, when they met, they said they didn't want the program there. So, literally 2 weeks before school started, he told us, I can't take your program to my school, sorry. We went to the next elementary school, Hawaiian, and said, can we come to your campus? The principal said, no, we don't want to. The facilities, we've got a bad sewage thing, and we don't have a room. But they had to meet with SCBM. They talked about it. It was one voice. On the SCBM council, before they used to have one student, it was the voice of that student that said, I think they deserve a chance to come to our school and try. And that student turned the rest of the Makua and community people on the SBM to say, all right, we'll try this for 1 year. That was 16 years ago. Once the program came, the school saw the value of that program for the whole school. Anyway, so you folks are in a good position. It sounds like you got a principal that's behind it already. You got community, you got parents, you got community that is ready for this. And like Lynn said, generally it's built one class, and then you just move them up rather than, I don't know that anybody's begun a whole school at one time. So there is going to have to be a cutoff point, and that decision will have to be made between you folks and administrators and so forth, depending on how that all works out. But it will come out the way it's supposed to come out. And as long as you folks stay dedicated to what you want to do. There was one question from Makua. What if a parent decides, I want to go Kaiapuni, and starts with the kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and then realizes, I'm not sure that this is for us anymore. What happens to that child when I say, all right, in second grade, I want to pull them out and put them into the English side? Has that ever happened before? Yes. Will that child be in academic trouble for the rest of their life? Absolutely not. Okay. So remember, English is not on the endangered language list of this world. It is not. Not even close. In fact, it's the imperial power that's trying to usurp all other languages. Is Hawaiian in trouble? Yeah, it's in trouble. It needs help. It needs that extra kakou that we're talking about, that Kale was saying, the more the kids are exposed to Hawaiian, the better. But like it was pointed out by Kaho'ohalahala, initially, when the Board of Education approved the program, K through 12, in 1990, I believe, they said that English would be delayed until 5th grade, not earlier than 5th grade. But he's suggesting that if we could push that back even further, it would benefit the Hawaiian and the English. And And that's been proven through studies that the stronger because they're going to learn all the skills. And I was explaining to some of the parents in our little group that our children, as they're going through the Kaiapuni program, by second grade, they had an interest in themselves already to want to learn to read English because they were empowered by reading Hawaiian. They already knew how to read Hawaiian. And they're saying, if I can read in Hawaiian, how come I can't read that? I think I can. As you go from left to right, those words, some of the letters are the same. And so they started reading and picking up on their own. And they were excited about that. They thought that was so cool. They had this tool, and now they're using it not only for Hawaiian, they can use it in English. Same thing with math, so forth. So they're learning all these skills through Hawaiian that can be transferred and used throughout their lives in different situations. And that's what we talk about, the Ike Hawaii, the Hawaiian knowledge base. That they will see the rest of the world through that Hawaiian lens. And how beautiful that is through the Hawaiian lens. Yeah? So we're giving something back to our children that for many of us, for me, myself, my mother, didn't speak Hawaiian. My grandparents spoke Hawaiian as children, but then when the Hawaiian was sort of beat out of them. And it wasn't until they were puna. And we had our children that they actually came out and started to use Hawaiian for 50, 60 years. They hadn't used Hawaiian since they were kids. So we're giving this back to them, but it's also for all of us, not just for the children. Children are the vehicle for all of us to jump into this. So, imua.
Once again, that we've addressed everything. Hopefully, I've been trying to track the expectations for today. I was able to check everything off except for 2 questions. The 2 questions that remain is where the community stands on this issue and what you guys want to do. And then, is everybody going to be on the same page in terms of philosophy, understanding the direction of Kaiapuni for Lanai, and when you make your decision? I would like to offer that, because I'm sure that a lot of weight is being carried on the shoulder of our 2 Lanai girls who are part of the Kaiapuni classroom currently. In terms of staffing the school, I would like to offer them the opportunity to share any insight in terms of what you guys are feeling or anything. So then, Kaui and Kauna'oa. Okay, you say it.
Sorry, I just had a really weird question because I really hate to put another campus in Vernon because we're going to be a little bit selfish, but just in case we cannot get our 2 Lanai girls home right away, is there like a group of teachers that we can kind of reach out to and say, boy, we need help a little bit, you can come help start us, get us going until our teachers are ready to come home or...
Well, I was going to say, when somebody asks, where do the teachers come from? You got to steal them from somewhere else. I mean, that's how we've actually built the capacity. We are building that capacity.
But I mean, some place that has more than 4 teachers, right?
But that's kind of a good thing too, because like you heard, the principal here saying, we kind of understand, but there is a small pool, but we're trying to build that pool because we are expecting, not only you folks, but across the state, we're expecting to expand, expansion. So we need to prepare the teachers. They are out there, and if we pool it and everything, and sometimes you got to add in some incentive. In the past, they've offered housing and help with housing and so forth to get a teacher over. And sometimes you have to have faith because sometimes that teacher doesn't show up till a week or 2 before school starts. But be faithful. Don't give up. You say, I don't have a teacher. Say, if we trust and believe, that teacher will come, and we'll have a teacher to begin. So.
And the thing is, we really don't steal. We're all good statewide. We know that there are needs out there. So when our teachers have to go somewhere else, we're doing that. We're scrambling and we're laughing and smiling because why do you take our teacher? But we know that the teacher belongs where the teacher is going to go. So, don't.
But many schools, they do steal like teachers.
It's not simply just getting a teacher to come into your classroom. So you have to consider that too. Even in starting this program, you have to realize there are several layers there in order to get the program started.
What's awesome.
Real quick, but I think there are resources, and what Lynn brought up earlier about Kaho'ohalahala and Kinoshita, and at the College of Education where I work at HLIP, I know for us, we're working on in the next 2 years to make, it's like a factory, but like to prepare 12 teachers for learning. I know Kinoshita is actually running one right now with 5 or 6, so it may be good to call both sides. And well, you know what, afterwards, I don't know who to talk to, but if there's opportunities for people within this group, within the community that you know of that are ready to go right now, we possibly have programs between our two universities that can help them out. So it can be really good to start looking within the idea.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing. Just know that in terms of the statewide movement, the news that Lanai is looking to open Kaiapuni is already out there. And there's a lot of murmuring going around about, how they're going to get a teacher, how they're going to get a teacher. So there's an awareness out there that Lanai wants to open, Lanai wants to move forward. In terms of making the resource available so that you can hire a teacher, we are working at the state office to make sure that that's ready to go if you guys decide to move forward. And I think after that decision is made and these other 2 questions can be answered, these 2 remaining questions can be answered by you, that's when we'll know how to start pulling our resources together to make sure we can support what you guys need here. And so I'm going to offer this back to the teachers.
Okay. Kalmai, I wish I spoke up when you asked us what our expectation was. Because my hope for today's meeting was to know what is our next steps. And like we all know, we want our kahua to be strong. And I'm really, skeptic of jumping up and being, okay, I'm gonna teach next year. Because I don't know what is those things that gotta be done. I don't know what is the time frame, and for those reasons, kind of make me, I want to make sure that our kahua is up before jumping on and end up being the kumu in the class with multiple grades, and not everyone in the community knows what that entails. So that's where I come from. But this is like my long-term goal. Of course I want to do it, but I wish I had a chance to know, okay, we're all here, we all know that we want to do it, so now what? From here to July, I don't know what is in the middle. So, you guys can we add that? And that way, because we have our stakeholders committee, and after this meeting, that's what's going to guide us to know what we got to do.
I'm just going to quickly respond to that by pointing back to the earlier comment that Melanie made. I think you're going to know what you need to do when you look into yourself, into your own house, understand where you need to be and where you need to go. I've often put in situations that make me realize that I'm supposed to be in that situation. And sometimes I acknowledge it and sometimes I don't. And when I don't acknowledge it, I go and slap upside my head for a lot of the And I think one of the things that I've come to learn is I I don't have a choice. Or Koho'ohalahala. I have been chosen, and I have to go with that kuleana. And I think when you look into your own ao, you're gonna know what to do. So just kind of think about that. Think about where you need to be in terms of your own personal beliefs about being a Lanai. I don't know.
I think from my perspective, because I'm probably the one who's going to carry this kuleana first. But like Antoine said, sustainability, that's my biggest fear. I don't want it to be the hottest ticket right now and then it fizzles out like Lahaina. Lahaina is a prime example how it started strong and then it dwindled. Right before I came there, it was almost gonna die. There was only my partner Nico, and then I came along, and then there were just two of us. So that's my word to all of you. You guys have to make that commitment. And if you're not gonna make it, it's not gonna work out. No matter if I'm here, I mean, I'll do whatever I need. I've done it before. And like how you said, I think I'm the person who will go with Ia. So I don't mind carrying that burden as long as everybody else has to step up to the plate. And that's kind of hard on Lanai. People don't make commitments and follow through. And I personally know. So that's what I ask all of you to do, because that burden is on my shoulders right now. So that's why in my head I'm thinking teacher recruitment already. I mean, Kali is my student. She was my student in high school. So I recruited her mentally back then, and now look, she's here. I know Sandy girl over there. She's doing a little Hawaii stuff. So that's my point now. I think I'm gonna need all you guys to go cool with the teacher recruitment, because I know if they're from here, they're gonna stay here, and that's the only way this program will survive. Go get the sustainability. It's gotta come from that. So I'm calling out to everybody. If you have a degree, come see me. I'm gonna recruit you. I'm gonna put you to the people that I know. And for me, all of these people have been in my life since I started Kaiapuni. And he was in Anuenue, family of Anuenue, Lana'i, Anuenue, they're all from Anuenue. That's where I started. That's how I got this pilina with everybody. So if you are interested, if you're thinking about Hawaii or anything to that effect, come and see me. I'm gonna be the top recruiter, teacher recruiter for Lanai, so that I can point you to the right people, because I know the right people. They're already here, and they're more than willing, I know, to help us get this started. So, mahalo.
My suggestion to answer your question as to next steps, I would like to suggest that I think you folks kind of know who each other is. I saw that there was some initial surveys that were done, and I also noticed that the numbers kind of drastically changed from September to December, some of those. But I would suggest that the parents get together, form a small committee, and start organizing yourselves, get everybody else's numbers and so forth, find out who these numbers are attached to, and then talk with the administrator. Start initial dialogue and say, all right, these are the families that we have, these are the children that we have that we feel are, we know we can fill a kindergarten and a first grade class, and whatever else you guys can do, but start that dialogue with the administrator now, and let them know so that he can start preparing on his end, working with Kaku's office and Keoni and so forth, whatever they need to do, so that from their end, they're prepared, from your end, you're prepared, and the children will be prepared for however this works out, whether you have one class, two classes, or three classes, whatever, however that works out for you folks this coming school year. But like Kauna'oa said, you have to make that commitment, and the commitment has to see beyond this year
and next year. It really is a lifelong process. As you can see, my wife and myself, we're kupuna now. We have 10 grandchildren, and we're still involved in pushing on this. And we will be until we, Kanu'ia or whatever. So that's what you have to see. So this is not a short time commitment. This is a lifelong commitment. And but I know, as I think some of you know, that if you make that commitment now, that you, your family, your community, and this island, and the whole state of Hawaii will be blessed by this. So, mai maka'u I kahana, maka'u I kaho'ohalahala. So that's saying is that don't be afraid of work, be afraid of laziness. Because, my kumu always said, nobody ever died from working. And that's true. All the old people I know, the old people, they're working. It's when you sit down and you go, haumana. And then, okay. So, keep working with it.
2 cents more, sorry, 2 cents more. When we choose to do something formal, or when we are about to engage in something formal, or we're just hearing something formal, please know that there will be adversity. There will be adversity. And the winds of adversity will come. Why? Because we choose that formal. So, see it for what it is. Don't take it personally. See it for what it is, because once you choose to do pono, adversity will come. And the measure of pono matches the measure of adversity. But in your na'ama, that will guide you and tell you, it's okay, it's alright, we're going to do this together. And I know what Papa was talking about, shouldering that kuleana. Fortunately, had a good effort going, and parents helped and everything. But that kuleana of carrying this, it really helps when everyone carry that kuleana together. I think that from the first time I met her, she's going through whatever is follow through. But just like she said, that needs to be awamu by everybody. You all in, or you all out. You cannot go half-half. You cannot go, okay, I'm going to come in and see how this goes. Nah. The most successful programs in the state, Kaiapuni programs, are the ones that have parents like yourself who are totally committed, will do everything and anything that is necessary to make sure this program moves forward. We have said, all of us have said the same thing to people who look straight in our eyes and said, yeah, and then turn around and cut the funds here and cut the funds there. We don't have control of it. We don't have all the answers, but I tell you what we do have. You and I know how to pray. We know how to hold it. We know how to hold it. We know how to ask the power that guides all of us to help us. I'm not painting a rosy picture. I'm telling you what Kupuna has taught us. If you listen to the Kupuna, let it guide you to do what you're doing today. Their plan back then, hundreds of years ago, is foolproof. Foolproof. So anyway, don't forget, you have adversity. It's because you're doing something fun. Because there are Kaho'ohalahala people who have adversity because they are Kaho'ohalahala. It's different. It's not the same thing.
Sorry, a real fast plug, and I think maybe talking about next steps. And Kauna'oa said she's going to be the one to shoulder this burden. One of the things I know, it's not necessarily a very next step, but one thing that the Lanai community can continue to do is support your guys' Kula Kaiapuni the summer program here on Lanai, the Kaiapuni summer program here on Lanai has grown, I think, triple from last summer. This past summer, the number was triple what it once was. And so, one thing that, if the answer is amongst you guys, wait until your makukau a little bit, or if it's, you know, or whatever the answer might be. Your guys' summer school, your Kaiapuni summer school program that Kauna'oa run right now is something that I think you guys can use as a tool to help facilitate building that strong kakou for your guys' Kaiapuni program. And you know, like said, there's adversity involved. The summer school program, there's tuition involved for that, but it's because it's outside of regular school time and during the summer and whatnot. But it's a place where you can find these interesting families, you can test the waters, you can meet your Kumus, you can meet the people running the program, you can continue to build that momentum so it doesn't die down in the community. So you talk about sustainability, the summer program is one place that you can give that sustainability year in and year out, and you can use it as a gauge for the community. So it's just one thing to not forget.
So with that, we're going to be hanging around. So if you guys have any personal questions that you guys would like to address with any one of us, please come up to us after we're done here. In terms of next steps, and the technical side of it, for the Department of Education's Hawaiian Language Immersion Program Office, Keoni and I are both excited. We're really rooting for you guys. We will await your decision in terms of a community, and you guys just let us know when you need, and if you need anybody else, any of these guys here, other people here, we will try and help do our best to make sure that you guys can get the services you need to make sure that you're making plans short-term and long-term to sustain the program here. With that, I'd like to offer the last comment to Mr. Kinoshita, who is your school administrator in Kaiapuni.
Thank you all for coming. It just reinforces, I think, the time has come. And I've got on record to say that I completely support your efforts. My job is to make sure, and this even goes to American government, the will of the people is met. And I think you made your voice clear. We still have some details to work out. I'm still getting input on the next steps. I think I have a little better idea after talking to colleagues. But it is in your hands. You as a group get together, decide how you want this to look. My job is to make sure that I can provide the resources to make that happen. You do have my commitment that I'll do everything I can to make that happen. Thank you.
I guess we'll just meet for lunch. Anybody want to come to it for us before we can have lunch? I know it's getting kind of late already. Kaho'ohalahala. Okay, we kuwi na, but the Kauna'oa.